Lots of twists and turns today, and here to help us untangle it all is Kevin Matthews. He's an assistant professor of history at George Mason University. Welcome back to the show.
Good to be here, Michelle.
So first of all, any surprises from today's Brexit votes?
I suppose the only surprise is that this is probably one of the worst starts of a premiership, certainly in modern history. Boris Johnson has lost every vote that has been put to the House of Commons by him since he's become Prime Minister. And how he can go on like this is anybody's guess.
I'm certainly sure Theresa May's probably looking on and perhaps thinking perhaps she didn't do such a bad job. Now, we know what's not on the table, according to the House of Commons: the no-deal Brexit and the snap elections that Boris Johnson was trying to call for October 15th. What is still on the table at this point?
Well, actually, no-deal Brexit isn't quite off the table yet because that bill has to go to the House of Lords. It's there now, and it's being filibustered by old Thatcherite peers, and they're going to try to keep it going until Parliament is prorogued next week. So there's still a possibility that bill won't pass. Johnson is in a very bad position. I think if we step back a bit, though, and realize that Brexit has never been about Britain. Britain is secondary to this. The important factor here is keeping the Conservative Party in office. That's what Brexit has always been about. That's why David Cameron called the referendum in 2016. And what Theresa May tried to do was to keep the factions of her party together. She failed. Johnson has decided to go in the opposite direction. That is why he has purged 21 members of his own party from from what's called the whip. And if he was thinking that his own version of the Night of the Long Knives was going to work for him, that seems to have backfired too, because there were only about a dozen of these rebels at the beginning of the week. When news got around that this was in the cards, that number rose to 21. And so now he has a negative majority of around 27, 28 MPs.
So then at this point then, what sort of leverage, if any, does Prime Minister Johnson have now trying to come to the EU?
Not much, and I think that's another good point. We concentrate on what's going on in London and Westminster. We're not talking about what's going on at the EU. The rotating presidency is now held by Finland, and the Prime Minister of Finland has made it clear that there's no reason to give an extension to the British if there's not going to be any serious negotiations. But it doesn't seem that they're going to get those from Boris Johnson. Johnson kept telling people that the negotiations were going very well. His Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, was telling people that they were making progress. But the truth is that they're making no progress at all. They have not offered anything concrete in the time that they've been given to come up with a new deal. And so it seems obvious that all along what they wanted to do was to crash out of the EU after the 31st of October, and then Johnson would go to the country on a people versus the parliament campaign for a new elections, and come back with a romping majority.
And we certainly saw that supported, according to Bloomberg. Senior EU officials, including Brexit chief negotiator Michel Barnier, briefed the ambassadors of the 27 member bloc countries and said that the talks were at an impasse. They said despite the promises that there would be concrete proposals from the UK, nothing has actually been brought forward. How will the rest of the EU be impacted if the UK does crash out?
Oh, it'll hurt. It will be very bad, especially for countries like the Netherlands and France, who do a lot of trade. And the country that will be most affected will be the Irish Republic. But the EU has decided that they cannot let the British walk away with a good deal. If they did, it would be too tempting for all the other members of the EU to say, well, why can't we walk out and have all the benefits as well? And that's another problem with Johnson's leadership. Johnson was among those in 2016 who, to use his own words, told the British people that if they voted for Brexit, they could have their cake and eat it. They could have all the benefits of EU membership and none of the downsides. And that has proved to be manifestly untrue. That is why he is so mistrusted, not just in London, but in Brussels too.
Now, I know that Bank of England Governor Mark Carney said that he'd scaled back the projected damage that a no-deal Brexit would do to the economy. At first, back in November, they said the projections were 8%. Still, a 5.5% hit is expected to the UK economy with a no-deal Brexit. How would Britons see that reflected in everyday life?
Well, they'll see it with higher prices for food. They'll see, in some cases, scarcity of food. They'll see absence of medicines, things like that. They'll see a much weaker pound, so that when they travel overseas, they will not have their pounds go as far as they might have before. I think it's a mistake to think that if the British crash out of the EU is going to be this massive catastrophe. It might be more of like a rolling catastrophe that happens in stages. And how any government is going to handle that, well, there's no way of knowing.